Concordia professor is detained in Iran. Stella wants to change the way we think about protesting the Grand Prix. And the SPCA can be kind of sketchy. It's time for another podcast. Not quite live from Forget the Box Studios in Montreal. This is the FTB podcast, the only podcast you're listening to right now. Okay, so let's meet our panel.
My name's Katie Nelson. I am a student at Concordia.
I'm Gabriel, and I am a contributor at Forget the Box.
And I'm Jason C. McLean. I'm the host of the podcast, editor and contributor at Forget the Box. And we are June the 12th, Sunday evening. What happened to summer? There's no summer in Montreal. But I'd rather be somebody here in Montreal than going through what Concordia professor Homa Hoodfar is going through. Hannah Besseau has more.
Concordia professor Homa Hoodfar has been jailed in an Iranian prison after conducting academic research on women.
I'm quite horrified.
We spoke with Kimberly Manning, a colleague of Hoodfar's.
This is disturbing on many levels. It's frightening because her health isn't great, and so many of us are worried about her well-being, and I think that's the thing that's first and foremost for everybody right now. But I think, in addition to that, I think that there's a really grave concern about academic freedom, the capacity of intellectuals to do work, and in particular, I think there's real concern that this arrest may be motivated in part by the focus of her scholarship, which has been largely to do with gender and women's issues.
Hoodfar, who was 65, was initially arrested in March, but was released on bail. She was arrested again last Monday. Has there been a reaction from the greater Concordia community?
Oh, my goodness, yes. So here at the Institute, certainly, many of my colleagues, we have a wide network of both full-time, part-time faculty, research fellows, associates, and everybody is extremely concerned about how we can support Homa and Homa's family, what kind of pressure we can place on the government, on our Canadian government, to try and get her home. There's a lot of concern and a real desire to do whatever we can to get her back.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, when people do come in and ask what can they do, what can people do? What advice do you give?
So there are several different petitions that have been taking off over the last few days. One is on avaz.org, and there's another petition which should be released shortly that is specifically for academics. There is another petition that former students of hers have developed and are publishing shortly as well. But in terms of the broader public, probably the best thing at this point is to make sure that your MP knows you're concerned about this, but also Stéphane Dion as well, who's, from what I understand, working very carefully on this issue and working quite hard on the issue. So I hope that's the case. But the more they hear from us, the more this will remain a priority for them.
Thanks, Hannah. Wow, that's really terrible news. A Concordia professor, a well-loved Concordia professor, behind bars in Iran. Nobody knows when or if she'll get out. It's also a kind of a pretty infamous prison that she's in right now. How does something like this happen, and what could we do about it?
Yeah, I had heard some interviews on CBC from her niece saying that what she was doing was least of all political. So to see that she has been imprisoned in what is a political prison, infamously, is really disturbing. But also her research, if I understand correctly, is largely focused in women and Islam. And so the fact that she's in this country and they're accusing her, I think the official accusation was to collaborate with a foreign government against Iran, is really, deterring as a woman in academia.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the apparently though one of the things too that we learned is that Iran is using this potentially as leverage because she's a dual citizen. She's actually a triple citizen. She's Canadian, Iranian, and Irish. And they're not recognizing her dual citizenship, so they won't let her speak with anybody from the embassy. And apparently what they're doing also is cracking down on dual citizens, and they might be trying to get a prisoner exchange. Somebody who's detained here in Canada, I believe it was for bank fraud or something like that they want back there, and they might be using her as a bargaining chip. But is our government doing enough? Is Concordia doing enough? Like, what, or do you think there's anything more we could be doing?
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about right now. But it just seems like, I mean, because of the amount of information that we've been getting, it seems like there isn't like the Canadian government isn't doing a lot. And I feel like a lot of people are a little dissatisfied from what happened with the beheading that happened in the Philippines. You know, remember that story?
Oh, yeah,
yes?
yeah. But
And, that we don't negotiate with, terrorist organizations. But now I find like they're kind of extending it to, like, countries, sort of like maybe not negotiating with Iran could be one of the policies that Canada takes.
Yeah, we don't have official.
We're not in Stephen Harper years, at least, right? So
no, but we still we don't have like an embassy. We don't have official. I think we're recently just started getting back official relations with Iran, and also, I mean, it's apparently originally the government said they wanted to do it through back channels. When she was originally arrested, before she ended up in this prison, they told her family not to go public. They were going to do this through back channels. And then I guess they decided the family had enough. And when she was put in this infamous prison, they decided, no, we're going to go public with it. And maybe put some more pressure on that way. I mean, is that a good idea, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely going to the media helps. I find it helps in a lot of cases. It just gets your cause out there and people have more information about it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it does help the cause. Sure.
I think they should have gone public from the very start. And I think that the government asking them to keep it private was more for media relations. It was in Harper's government that we cut diplomatic ties with Iran. And I think this is a direct consequence of doing that. And also what is happening now where they're refusing to give her any rights. She has no access to her lawyer. Nobody can speak to her. And she can't access any embassies is also on top of that a consequence of cutting diplomatic ties. But more interestingly, what I found to be curious was that her niece in the interview I heard initially this past week couldn't get any help from the government, and so they were looking at reaching out to the Irish government for help. And so the fact that Trudeau's government is doing next to nothing to the point where these people's families have to go to other governments for help is really concerning.
Yeah. Well, that is concerning. I didn't know that at all, that they had to go to another government. That should not be the case.
She's also an Irish citizen, but she spent most of her time Canadian, Irish, and Iranian. She spent most of her time in Montreal. This is her home. She teaches at Concordia. She was still doing helping with some theses of certain thesis candidates. And that's, I think it's a symptom of the fact that Trudeau likes to look better than Harper, but they aren't really changing much of what Harper put in place. Or if they're changing it, they're changing it very slowly. Like Justin Trudeau's not the kind of guy that's going to enact all these horrible laws or make all these dumb decisions, but he's going to keep the dumb decisions on the books, unless he's really forced to change it. I mean, maybe if there's a petition, I believe, but the petition is not, interestingly enough, not directed at Justin Trudeau. It's directed at the supreme leader of Iran to get him to release her.
I think that's only because Justin Trudeau's obviously very well demonstrated his lack of power in this situation. And on top of that, the consequences that we have lived through. The Harper government has given us very little power. So I think that maybe that's another really good indication that we have to petition other governments because ours doesn't have our back.
Yeah, it's kind of strange that considering, I mean, we all know Justin Trudeau's a feminist because it's 2016, right? And you think that our feminist prime minister would be able to get things done, but apparently going to the supreme leader of Iran's a better tactic. It's just really, I mean, I hope she gets back safe. I don't see an end game. I don't know international politics as well as like people who actually practice it. Yeah. But I don't know. Do you think this is going to end well?
No.
I don't know.
I really hope so. I really hope it's going to end well. In fact, there's a lot of really bad things happening in the news these days, and we're going to get into that with a few different news stories. A lot of stories have been in the news lately. This last story only hit the news today. We don't have any members from the LGBT community on the panel. We didn't know this was going to happen. This just happened in Orlando, Florida, at a nightclub. 50 people were killed, 53 more were injured by what has to be an act of rampant homophobia, a total hate crime carried out with guns in the United States. It is the worst, I believe, since Wounded Knee. It is the worst mass shooting in American history, and it happened today. And there was a second story of a man in San Diego who was or in California who was headed to the LA Pride Parade, and he was fortunately caught with a bunch of ammo, bullets, and explosives in his car, so he wasn't able to get there. Now, this story is still developing. It's Sunday night that we're doing this. By the time you hear this on the podcast on Wednesday, more details might have come to light. But right now, it's pretty predictable. The left is going on about how this has to do with guns, and the right is going on about how this has to do with radical Islam and immigration. And Donald Trump even gave a tweet saying, thanks for the congrats to all the people who said he was right about radical Islam. Like, I mean, God, that's the worst way you could tweet about a tragedy. But I mean, it's horrible, and it's something that happens all the time, which is really sad.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, important to note that the event that was happening during the shooting was a trans event that was like largely specific to Black culture. So there was a lot of trans people at the event who were also attacked and victims of the shooting. So I think it's important to reflect that an entire community were consequences as a result of one person.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that this guy isn't savvy enough of the differences between different members of the LGBT community. I don't think he necessarily knew it was a trans event. Maybe he did. I don't think he's that picky. I think he just hated all people that were maybe quote unquote different from him. But yeah, it really is devastating. You know, I mean, ISIS, quote unquote, did take credit for it, but they just take credit for everything. It's not like they're an organization that carries these things out in North America. They just take credit for things that they think they can. So I think that, I don't know, but what we really should be looking at is the hatred and the homophobia and the lack of security for that community.
Well, it's also in a country where it's so easy to, like, I mean, every time we hear about, the gun control debate comes out after, like, shootings like this, but we know the answer. There's going to be no resolution whatsoever. Yeah. So how do people protect themselves in a country where anyone can just get a weapon?
He bought his gun legally, apparently. That's what I heard today. The shooter actually bought his gun
Yeah, so how do you
legally
protect yourself in that case? Like, should the LGBT community be arming themselves too?
I mean, that would be the same argument if you were looking at saying the best way to protect against school shooting is to arm the teachers. I think less guns. I mean, I've never wanted to own a gun. I've never felt the need to own a gun. Maybe if there was like wild predators outside my door and I lived in the middle of nowhere, then I might see the use of it. But I personally, I mean, you can't live in fear too. That's the other thing too. You have to go on with your life, not living in fear, but knowing that something like this could happen. I mean, this was like I guess the members of the community considered this bar to be a safe space. And I guess it wasn't really a safe space when somebody came in with a gun.
Yeah, I just think that like this is a community of people who are regularly targeted through homophobia, transphobia, biphobia. So many different people have attacked them in the past. So I don't think it's like necessarily like, perhaps maybe for you feel safe and you feel like you don't need to be afraid, but you're also not like a targeted minority in society, right? But on top of that, how do we protect ourselves from shooters and hate crimes as millions of different people from different groups and identities? I don't think the solution is going out and buying guns, although when there are mass shooting, gun sales do go up as a result of feeling scared to experience a similar incident. I think it's also about changing ideologies, which is so much easier said than done, but certainly not helpful in an election period where hatred and Islamophobia and homophobia, anti-women sentiments, all of these things are so rampant and so on the front line of all the news and creating such a buzz. Yeah.
I mean, I remember, just I guess a different example, the different community, but I remember when Pauline Marois was bringing out the Charter of Quebec Values, there was there was hate attacks on the street, like against somebody who was wearing a hijab, but also somebody who was speaking English, just basically, the election talk just ramps it up. And I guess people who are maybe have an axe to grind with society and happen to have weapons, they see that their only worth is to do something like this, they go out and do it. But I mean, I guess the solution is there is no solution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least none that I can think of now. I'll try. The solution would be for we have to censor this on iTunes, but fucking assholes like that to just stay at home and not do anything. Or don't mean to sound a little bit aggressive, but maybe in that case he could have just turned the gun on himself and before going into a bar, and it would have been a lot easier on everybody. But Katie, you have another story, which is a little bit. I mean, this is a bad story, but it's at least there's no death involved in it yet, so it's hopefully not.
So I saw a story come across my newsfeed on social media about a man whose dog was essentially stolen from him. So I guess, like, long story short, he went on a business trip and left what still appears to be a puppy, a very large one, in the care of a dog sitter. And there was some kind of argument between them, and the dog sitter brought the puppy to the SPCA and dropped it off. And he went to the SPCA, it was in the West Island, to try and get back his dog, and brought paperwork and photos proving that this was in fact his dog, explained the situation. The SPCA told him that he would have to adopt the dog again, and informed him that they would tell him when the dog was up for adoption. And he called regularly trying to see what was going on with the dog, whose name is Maya, and couldn't get through to them. They blocked his number, they ignored his calls. Finally, he saw on their Facebook page his dog up for adoption and called again. They weren't answering. They refused to talk to him. He made a comment under the picture of the dog saying, like, this dog was stolen from me, this is my dog, please don't adopt it, I'm trying to adopt this dog. Couldn't adopt the dog, and then finally he got through to the SPCA, and they informed him that the dog had already been adopted and was gone. And so and on top of that, his comment under this dog's picture was deleted and removed by the SPCA, so nobody knew the dog was stolen. So he's in this huge battle right now, trying to get this dog back, trying to figure out who has his dog. And I think most people who've dealt with SPCA know that they can be so incredibly sketchy, and the service and ability to get back animals who have been stolen, or to adopt animals, or to get a healthy animal from them, has been very difficult. So yeah, I'm pissed about this on your behalf, because I have 2 cats and I've had issues with the SPCA. I have friends who've had issues with them in adopting dogs, helping dogs, whatever. So
do you think the SPCA is just trying to make some money off people, or is this like a scam? Like how?
I don't know. I have no idea. I know that, like, in the past, like, I had a friend who adopted a pit bull from them, and they gave this dog a clean bill of health, everything's fine, take the dog's great with other dogs, and this dog ended up, it was a wonderful dog, it deserved a family. I think I met the dog, it was a beautiful dog, ended up attacking another dog, and so she brought it back to the SPCA, and they were so judgmental and so just inaccessible to this person to get help for their animal. I know they've taken my pets before, and it's like a fight to get them back. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I think
could it be related to maybe like a funding problem? Because I mean, they're always trying to raise money for the SPCA. I mean, there's a lack of funding, just like a lack of good organization or something in the group.
Absolutely. I also think that, like, trying to pump out as many animals out of those shelters as they can. I adopted 2 cats from there. I was mentioning it earlier. Who the SPCA gave them a clean bill of health, and not even 2 months later I found out they both have severe health issues that I'm managing now for 3 years. And going back to the SPCA and saying, like, you gave these animals clean bills of health, they don't at all have clean bills of health. Like, how do I know adopting this animal? On top of that, it puts a lot of more animals back onto the street, because people who go in and adopt a cat or a dog from the SPCA thinking that it's manageable and that it's healthy, end up finding that they're paying hundreds and hundreds in vet bills that they can't afford, and the dog or cat is abandoned again. So I have, like, a list of beef with SPCA on how they treat people, and how they treat animals, and especially for this man who is, like, fighting to get his pet back. And
to help, I mean, I guess I guess maybe we'll post the link to the story in the when we share the podcast, and people can comment that way. Personally, I've never dealt with the SPCA, but I did have a bad dealings with the Baker Animal Hospital, not the Baker Animal Hospital, the DMV. It's an all-night animal hospital. I had a cat that had urinary blockage. It was actually my old roommate's cat who left it to me. I brought him in, and they said, first of all, they said he's a mean cat, and they said you have to pay $1,000, $500 up front, we'll unblock him, or we can put him down right now. And eventually, like, we convinced them to do a temporary unblocking for like the whatever we'd paid to come in, and they took him to another place that had credit the next day, so he ended up being fine. But yeah, that's
This is cruel. Kinda.
that's cruel. Now, Jerry, you have a story as well too, right?
I had some problems with the SPCA. Like, I've gone in there and I've asked, like, I just wanted to get some information on, like, vet, for my cat was having medical issues, and I didn't get good information. I thought maybe there's something wrong with the structure, or something wrong with the the funding, and I still think it's that. I really think, I don't know. I'd like to see a really good animal organization that, like, I don't know. I feel like the SPCA cares about animals, but I also feel like they're overwhelmed. Okay, I just generally feel like it's overwhelmed.
For those of you listening to this later on the podcast, you might not realize, but we are streaming this live on Facebook, and we just got a comment. Does he not have proof that it's his dog's pictures, vet bills?
Yeah, he does. He has vet documents, he has pictures, he has the original vaccination documents or something that proves he's the owner. All the paperwork he has. He's brought it to the SPCA, he's posted it online. He has completely and entirely proved he's the owner and proved it before they gave the dog up for adoption.
Okay.
So I think he should sue the SPCA to nothing.
But yeah, hopefully he will. And somebody who's, Jerry, you're going to tell us about the story of the man who got his day in court and didn't get the sentence that everyone was hoping he got. Brock Turner. Yeah.
Well, everyone knows about the story, right? The guy who happened to see a woman who was unconscious and decided, I'm going to have a little fun. And I think what the most interesting part of the story that I've been reading from the CBC is that it took 16 months to get his mugshot. Like 16 months for journalists to dig up this guy's mugshot. But I don't know. It's like, are we seeing a double standard here?
Yeah.
Obviously we must be, because it's so easy. When a black person commits a crime in the States, their mugshot is up like in 2 seconds.
Yeah, or even if they're shot by the police, there's some shot up of them looking very tough. Like, we all have photos on Facebook where we look really tough, and then photos where we look very nice. Yeah. But obviously the one where he looks like really tough, that's the one that's going to be shared the moment right away. So yeah, it's a total double.
And if you look at the mugshot, everyone looks terrible in the mugshot. He looks completely psychotic in it, and he looks bad just because everyone, it's a sleepless night and you're in bad state.
Yeah.
And what's your take on this story? Did you hear about what the dad wrote?
Oh, it's sad.
Why did he get like 6
for 20 minutes of
I can't believe he got 6 months. That's kind of ridiculous.
No, he should have had a lot longer than 6 months. But that's at least he got that. That's compared to the justice system, how it normally works. A lot of guys don't really have that for rape or even murder sometimes. Like, it's rape culture, but it's also like a double standard. And the fact that this guy is a rich white swimmer, that's, I think, why he got this. Like, I think at least this time, unlike the basketball stars from a few years ago, where the whole community, or the football stars, where the whole community needed them to win or something, at least this time, I don't think there's big community support for this guy. And now his picture's up everywhere, so that's at least a good thing. But it still shows that how our justice system is really not caught up with where it should be.
I think he's a U.S. senator. I'm not sure, though. He's also a judge. He called for the judge to be stepped down or be kicked out of being a judge whenever it's gotten seated, and for a reevaluation of the sentence.
And he was a Republican, too, I think, right? That's
from Texas.
From Texas Republican.
Texas. These people are not usually like this.
During the trial, Brock mentioned kind of like the party culture at university. Yeah. And he blamed it. Like, he blamed it for the situation that he got in. Do you think it's a problem? Like, I know, like,
I think the culture is a problem. I don't think it's an excuse, but it's a problem.
University have like a party culture that leads to kind of a rapey culture?
I don't think going out to a party, I think there are obviously like frosh and things like breed this kind of mentality that consent isn't a thing. Amongst other forms of violence, but I think at the same time that regardless of whether or not you party, there are basic and fundamental things like not raping someone, not sexually assaulting someone, not doing acts of crime against someone, and I think that that's not so much a party culture as it is a culture of men in general in the States, a large portion of men, and
we've heard of
Stanford's party culture.
But you've heard of mob mentality. Like, if you're in during a riot, like, you act differently.
Yeah,
So he's like, do people act differently
He was behind a dumpster alone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know where the mob was.
Yeah,
exactly.
Actually, the mob, the two guys who saw him doing this and actually saved the day, well, I mean, as much as they could by chasing him down and actually catching him. Otherwise, she never would have known who did this. Like, and just caught him. Those guys are heroes. I mean, there's no real way to say it. In this case, the mob sort of. The mob did did a good job. But speaking about things like consent, and that relates definitely into sex work. And there's a big story going on this weekend, being Grand Prix weekend in Montreal. And Enzo Sabbagha has this report.
All right, thank you, Sandra Wesley, the executive director of Stella. Thank you for letting me speak with you today. Now, first of all, could you briefly explain this campaign in your own words?
Yes, absolutely. In the past several years, whenever the Grand Prix comes around, there's always several campaigns against sex workers and against sex work that make outlandish claims about sexual exploitation and trafficking that they believe happens during sporting events. We know because we have a lot of studies that back us up, and because we work actually with sex workers, being a by and for sex workers organization, we know that this is not true. So this year we wanted to make sure that our voices were also part of the conversation, and that people knew that sex workers do not want to be saved and do not want police repression in our lives.
Now, the campaign you're launching are you launching it as part of the National Day of Action in Canada? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So for many years now, since the Bedford case at the Supreme Court, every year in June, we've been doing a National Day of Action across Canada. There are over 30 groups that are part of the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, and we keep fighting to have to remove criminal laws around sex work because they're a violation of our human rights. So this is an opportunity for us to do various actions across the country.
And how do you feel about the National Day of Action this year being at the same time as the Grand Prix?
Well, it seems it's a bit of a happy coincidence that it happened around the same time as the Grand Prix. This is by far for us one of the worst times in terms of police repression. We're still hearing reports from the weekend when police were doing various raids in places where sex workers work and having other police operations to infringe on sex workers' rights. And as far as we know, no actual minors or no actually exploited women were found. What happened, however, were women getting arrested, women with precarious migration status potentially getting deported. So it's a very dangerous and negative time for us.
Yeah, and there's also other groups who are arguing that sex work goes into the realm of human trafficking, and that's something also you're trying to fight. And actually, there were abolitionist groups who are also protesting the Grand Prix, but for different reasons, as you. And I was wondering if the two protests met on the streets and if something happened there.
Yes, there was a protest on Saturday organized by prohibitionists who are explicitly against all sex work and do not believe that sex workers can speak for themselves. So we decided to go there just so that people would know that that we do exist and we do have voices and we do have opinions. So they had a very small march against sex work. So we were there with our red umbrellas just to let people know that their side of the story was a very biased and incomplete side, and that there were negative consequences on us.
That's great. And now, just because it's very important, I think, that people realize what you do. What is it that Stella does all year aside from doing these campaigns?
So we are a by and for sex workers group. Our mission involves one part that is human rights work, where we defend the rights of sex workers. But the biggest part of our work is actually service provision, where we go, we have a team of 7 outreach workers who go everywhere where sex workers work or otherwise in Montreal. We distribute condoms and other material. We provide information. We produce a lot of information for sex workers so they can be aware of the law. They can be aware of how to protect themselves from STIs. We also go to prison to do workshops around hepatitis C and HIV. So we provide a lot of direct services to sex workers on the ground.
And talking about the laws, what are the laws regarding sex workers and sex work in general in Canada right now at the moment?
So currently the new laws that were put in place in December 2014 are based on what we call the Swedish regime, which the idea is to get rid of the sex trade through criminalizing everything around the sex worker. So clients are criminals. There are various provisions where it's illegal to communicate in order to provide services. It's also illegal to advertise services. It's illegal to hire any third parties to work with you, such as receptionists or drivers, in order to stay safe. It's also illegal for sex workers to, in many ways, work as a team because they can be charged with various things under these criminal laws. So we have on our website at Stella.org, we have some info sheets that go over the various provisions of the law. But the gist of it is that the sex worker is prevented from doing her job, and there are many ways in which police can intervene in her life and surveil her. And a lot of women are in contact with police constantly and are arrested, even if it might not be directly for sex work laws. Other criminal laws are often used, and there's a lot of repression.
Yeah. So it's kind of, the government is kind of saying, okay, let's just ban all form of sex work. And that's going to prevent us from having kind of a black market and human trafficking. And your idea is, no, let's decriminalize sex work, because that's where we can have a healthy way of having sex work in our community.
Yes, absolutely. And even in cases where there might be exploitation, or even in cases of human trafficking, there's a lot of data that shows that criminal laws actually impede the work to help people who need the help. When we're criminalized, we do not contact the police if we need them. So Amnesty International came out with a policy recently, and many other human rights groups agree that the best way to fight exploitation is to decriminalize sex work. And that's why our campaign this year was to say that we're against exploitation, therefore we're against prohibition.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now, finally, I have one last question. What do you think will end up happening with sex work laws in Canada in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years? Like, what are your objectives, and do you think they will be met?
Our objective is to repeal the current laws and to decriminalize sex work. The current laws were passed by the Harper government. We have a new government now, and the Liberals at the time opposed the laws that were then adopted. So we're hoping that within Justin Trudeau's first term that these laws can be repealed. We encourage everyone who agrees with us to contact their elected officials and let them know that they support human rights for sex workers. And if we don't have a positive response from the government, then our only option will be to go back to the Supreme Court, which we will do if we need to.
Well, good luck with everything you do, Sandra, and thank you for speaking with us today. You can check out Stella's action and Stella's organization on shestella.org. Is that right? And do you have
Exactly.
And do you have another page, a Facebook page, like where we can?
Yes, we're on Facebook at Les Amis de Stella, and we're also on Twitter at Amis de Stella.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sandra.
My pleasure.
So yeah, Grand Prix heats up every year. There's always protests, but it always bugs me that the protest is very somehow secretly or sometimes not too secretly abolitionist. But that didn't happen this year because Stella had a voice in the protest against well, not just against exploitation, but against prohibition of sex work. And they also noted that there was a huge crackdown on sex workers by the police using the Grand Prix as an excuse. I mean, this happens every year, and I'm glad. For one, I'm glad that Stella is speaking up.
Yeah. Stella is my preferred choice in protests. I think that there is a lot of tension between groups like Stella and also groups that are abolitionists like CLES, but I think that it's important that we fight for the rights of women and the right to choose what they want to do with their body, and I think Stella is an ideal and great representation of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the world's oldest profession because it's been around, and I don't know, like, abolitionism has only worked one time, as far as I know, for slavery. Yeah. And that was about it. Yeah. Because I honestly, it's just part of human nature. Drinking, sex, and drugs. Like, all the things that everyone wants to ban, it's just it won't work. It's a morality issue for a lot of these people, and I understand, but it will never go away. You can't just make it disappear. You know, it's better to have it regulated, to have the women protected, and perhaps even have a possible union or something where the people are protected under as a job. But you had
you had a chance, Kate. You've been very active on social media this week, and you had a chance to speak with somebody who has a different opinion on it, an abolitionist, and you had a kind of a heated discussion, right?
So I had a heated discussion on the Facebook event page with so many different participants. I'm not sure if them were actual organizers from the organization that is abolitionist or not, but that was interesting and incredibly offensive. And then I did get a chance to speak to somebody from CLES, the organization, today, just really briefly about issues of Facebook posts from opposition voices and opposition from people, and also women, and also tons of other people who were voicing concerns on their event page that were removed by the organization itself. And so it was pretty brief, but it was pretty good. I see that they have a different perspective, and it was interesting to hear out that perspective. I personally have not changed my opinion on being against abolition of sex work, but one of the things they described was how there was like a counter post to theirs. I think it was on Saturday they had their protest.
In Phillips Square, right?
Yeah, as I understand it, some people showed up, and then some people who were attending the abolitionist protests felt unsafe and left. But in discussing with this person, it was largely, it was a very weird conversation in that the term of safe space keeps getting brought up, and I think that it's a very slippery slope, and it's a very thin line to walk in discussing abolishing sex work as a trade for many women and many men and many other people who really enjoy that trade and really value their work in that, and really quite without much coercion enter into that trade, and to hear an organization discuss abolishing it and almost taking away the agency and autonomy of women who enter into the sex trade away completely by saying that they're just coerced into it and they're manipulated into it is really violent in itself. So, and one aspect of discussing with this person was thinking that of course there's opposition, and of course there will be opposition to your protests, and that should be expected. And I really encourage women and everybody of all identities and trades to go out and really voice, I guess, encouragement for women and people who are in the sex trade and sex industry, and to also offer them support if they feel like they're being exploited. And that's why I really like Stella, is because they made it very clear during the Grand Prix they were against exploitation. I
think both groups want to protect women. They want exactly the same things.
Do they though, or does one group maybe more interested?
I'll give the abolitionists the benefit of the doubt. I think they just want to protect women too, but they have a view that they want something to come to an end. That's it's the same thing with people who are against drugs. It's if we ban drugs, let's ban it, and no one will do it anymore. This, it's unrealistic. It actually doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I don't know. It's really kind of imposing your belief system on someone else too. Yeah. So absolutely. And it also, you gotta be careful. There's fine to have morality and have a fine line in that, but then you have to be kind of realistic in what you're kind of against. And are you really protecting these women if you ban it? Because now you're gonna marginalize these women, and they're gonna hide, and it's gonna get worse. In every situation where someone gets banned, that's what happens usually, right?
Well, so it seems almost to me it sounds like I guess prohibition sounds like more of an out of touch mentality. It's out of touch, or maybe from a very privileged position of let's just ban it and everyone will be happy. It seems like a simple solution to something that's not simple at all. Yeah. And it denies.
But there is
obviously.
Some people are actually sold into sex slavery.
Okay, but there's a difference
but I don't think
between
these women.
Sex work and sex trafficking. And I think that we need to be very careful when we say that sex work is sex trafficking, because you are removing the agency of a human being and saying that they're just blindly doing something with no autonomy.
That I think is ridiculous. Yeah.
And on top of that, I think that there are a lot of really amazing people that I know who are in sex work and who take different measures and different means to their work. And and I
I've
think that
known a few
organizations,
people
like,
who have been in that, and they all made that decision. That was their life decision to make it, and they made a lot more money than I made.
And then there's
and that's what was their job.
There was one person who called me a capitalist because they said that this is an issue of right to work, but it's not just simply an issue of right to work. It's a right for people to do what they want with their bodies. And I think that, like, you know, another comment that was pro-abolitionist was that it was like an economic coercion, and it was a capitalist thing to do. And of course it is in many ways. You have to make money and pay your rent, but so does the barista at Starbucks, right? And we're not rallying behind Starbucks employees to try and get them to abolish Starbucks or abolish work or labor as a whole as a means to, like, stopping the problem of capitalism. We're creating unions and rights for those people to help ensure that they can work safely and fairly. And I think it's the same thing for sex work, is that in separating a sex worker from any other worker, we almost immediately alienate them when we say that their work is not as valuable or as true as any other labor.
And we know from history we endanger their lives, like all the missing women that we have in this country.
And there's a tweet, I think, that kind of sums up what you were saying. It takes it a bit beyond Starbucks. It's I don't have credit for that. I don't take credit for this. I wasn't the one who said it. I can't remember the name of the person who did say it, but that treating or having a problem with a sex worker selling their body and not having a problem with a sex worker selling her body and not having a problem with a coal miner selling his body shows that you have you've attached your morality to 18th century values or something to that effect. Sexuality, yeah. The actual tweet was brilliant. It was 140 characters of brilliance, which I've seen. I think I've seen other people try to explain that in longer detail, but that tweet pretty much summed it up.
But at the end of the day, I just feel like this is nobody's business other than the people who are within that trade. And I think that what they would like to do with their time and their labor and their bodies and their identities is completely their right, and not up for all of Montreal and different organizations to come in and say that they can't, and to have these debates. And obviously, I think, like, the heart of this is that during the Grand Prix, there's a lot of exploitation and child prostitution and tons of different issues, which we could focus on and discuss. But I think sex workers and shaming sex workers for being sex workers, which was, like, happening all over that Facebook event page, is, like, the most and I said this and got a lot of heat for it, anti-feminist thing to do is to tell people what they can and cannot do with their body, or what they ought not do with their body. And so I think that the lack of response from that organization, CLES, to some of the comments and hatred coming from their supporters was the epitome of the problem of this discussion.
Is there a division in feminism regarding the subject? Because, I mean, I've heard feminists say that they're for it and against it.
But this is why, when I was talking to one of the people from the organization, this is what one of the comments they made, is that it's like a division in the movement, or division of women. And I think that, like, they had used the word revolutionary women think this, and I'm pretty political, and I'm an anarchist, and I seek insurrection and revolution, and that's my goal in life. And I personally don't understand what the issue is with having discussions on topics that create division within movements, especially discussions about a group of people who are already endangered, who are already oppressed, who already face struggles for doing what they do, versus a group of people who want to prevent them from doing it. And so I think that, there's obviously a division, and I think, like, I've met great people who are abolitionists and have really cohesive arguments that I just personally don't agree with, and then I've met people that I met on the Facebook event page when arguing with them who are just so incoherent and so incapable of describing anything that has any founding in feminism or the rights of women, the rights of women's bodies and who they belong to. And so if that's a division, then if we're creating that division from those people, then I think that's probably more of a positive than a negative.
Yeah. That's, like I say, we'll leave that at that. It's obviously something that's going to keep going. And we'll move on to the community calendar.
Folkfest gears up for its annual festival along the canal starting June 15th through to June 19th. Visit www.montrealfolkfest.com for full event listings. Thursday, June 16th, the Pink Bloc Montreal will be holding a vigil for the survivors and victims of the Orlando shooting. The event will be held at Parc de la Soire from 6:45 to 8:45. Friday, June 19th, join the 4th Annual Rendezvous for Métis Artists. The event will be held in Old Montreal and runs through until June 19th. Sunday from 12 to 4 p.m., join the Ouroboros Community Center for a Father's Day support event. The event is intended to support individuals with non-existent, estranged, or difficult relations with their fathers and will include narrative therapy and mindfulness techniques. Finally, June 21st to June 28th, the Center for Gender Advocacy is hosting their annual Summer Night Screening Series. Join the CGA at 1500 Maisonneuve West, Suite 404 every Tuesday for 3 weeks at 6 p.m. for free film screenings and discussions. Free popcorn will also be included.
Time for predictions.
Stumpgate will take on new meaning when Coder will come home to find all his furniture replaced by tree stumps. And I will finally get some sleep from my vacation in Asia.
I predict that the puppy Maya will be reunited with her owner and that the SPCA will no longer get donations. And I also predict that Brock Turner is going to be resentenced, hopefully forever. And that will still not solve the issues of violence against women, but it will create a setting in which we can fight them. Yeah.
Now I guess I'm gonna do the funny ones. I predict that the SPCA will officially endorse Donald Trump for President of the United States. And the second one is the fact that we've laid off U.S. politics this entire podcast. Like last time, I'll make the same prediction. I'm gonna go home and after Game of Thrones, I'm gonna binge watch some Bernie speeches. But on Game of Thrones, my prediction for that, a few more people are going to die. Thank you very much to Jerry and to Katie for being part of this podcast. You can read up about them on Forget the Box or online, or you can just follow anything hashtagged SPCA, and Katie's name will probably be there somewhere on Facebook. So, or also you can follow Katie on Twitter.
Yeah.
At Katie Nelson MTL.
Right.
Yeah. And Jerry, you can read on Forget the Box, and me on Forget the Box. We'll catch you in 2 weeks for the next FTB podcast. The FTB podcast by the Forget the Box Media Collective in Montreal was hosted by Jason C. McLean and produced by Hannah Besseau. For daily, unique, original content covering news, music, politics, arts, lifestyles, food, film, you name it, we've got it. Check out